Hey everyone, welcome back to Dorm Squad Sports, college sports podcast focusing on Alabama sports. I'm Dakota, here with my roommates Bryant and Oakley. We got a great episode this week. We're going to be talking about the week in general, talking about Saban's comments, the Jalen situation. We also have our top 5 losses from rival teams, and of course our picks to end the week. But we start with our elephant in the room. And Oakley, what is your elephant in the room?
Yeah, mine's about Jalen Hurts. And so he stepped on the field last Saturday, solidifying or really rejecting his chance to redshirt for the year. And it just shows what kind of a man Jalen is because Kelly Bryant, I'm not going to say the exact same position, but he had a younger guy, take his place, and he opted to leave. I'm not saying that wasn't the right decision for Kelly Bryant, but it really shows the maturity of Jalen Hurts, given his situation, to stay, and Bama fans really rewarded him with that not standing ovation, but that ovation with all the applause and everything.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't at the game, but I gave him a standing ovation. I stood up from the couch. But my elephant in the room was just attendance. I wrote this before Saban made his comments, but our AD, he put a video out on Twitter where he did like a panoramic video, and you could just tell the attendance from people who bought their ticket, like normal fans, and then the student section, and it was just so they were so drastic, the change. And just having that, it's really frustrating, honestly, because, I mean, I always say, play for 4, stay for 4, but there's so many people, and I get why they don't go the whole game because it is an 11 a.m. and you are playing UL Lafayette. It's just, I feel like that's going to become an issue later on, and maybe even in a year or two while we're still here. There's probably going to be a change to the student section sooner or later. Bryant, what's yours?
Yeah, I was talking about the run defense a little bit. Run defense hasn't been terrible this year, but I think it's definitely safe to say it's not as dominant as it's been in the past. And I think as Alabama gets deeper in their schedule and they see teams like LSU, Mississippi State, and Auburn, teams that are going to be able to run the ball, I think it's important that we improve up front, stopping the run, build some depth in ways we can keep guys fresh. But I think they'll be able to do that. I'm not necessarily worried about it, but it's just something to keep your eye on.
Yeah, definitely. Now let's talk about like the game in general. Of course, we had 3 quarterbacks that got time in the game. Tua, he got about a quarter or so. He came back in a little later, and he just had the closest you're going to get to a perfect game. He didn't have a single incompletion. He got, I believe, 3 touchdowns, 268 yards on just 8 passes. Obviously he's going to be one of our MVPs. But not only him playing well, but QBR-wise, both Jalen and Mac did even better. So just having 3 quarterbacks all prove, even against an inferior opponent, how well they're doing. That's just a great sight to see. Now, of course, always we do our offensive, defensive MVPs. We all get a pick. We can't pick the same person. Bryant had first pick this week. Who'd you take?
Yeah, I'm taking Henry Ruggs. He had, on the stat line, he had 5 catches for 115 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had the one play where Jalen threw it to him across the middle, and he broke a few tackles and made an impressive play to score a touchdown. Henry Ruggs gets overlooked a lot, I think, because of Devontae Smith and who made the national championship, the game-winning national championship catch, and then Jerry Jeudy, who a lot of people think is the best wide receiver on the team. But Henry Ruggs is right up there with him. I feel as comfortable throwing the ball to him as I do the other two. He's a special player.
Yeah, and I think having Tua at quarterback really helps because he'll get it to whoever's open, and there's always going to be someone open. In previous years, we always have a wide receiver he'll get the stats every now and then, but you can tell he has the talent. He'll be a 5-star. He just doesn't get the reps usually. A Cam Sims or someone even further on down the line. Mulaney or Dieter, just whoever it is, because we can't give the ball to everyone. But Tua gives the ball to everyone. That's why I made him my MVP. Like I said, he had pretty much a perfect game. 8 for 8, 2 touchdowns. By the way, when I said 368 yards or whatever before, that was all quarterbacks, or 268. Tua himself had 128 of them, 2 touchdowns on his own. He had an almost perfect game, even though the stats aren't going to show it because it's Lafayette and he played a quarter. He just proved how great he is, even against inferior opponents. He still came to play. And Oakley, you had the last pick.
Yeah, Bryant said something about feeling comfortable throwing with all 3 of those guys. I'm going to add a guy to your list, Jalen Waddle. This guy comes in as a freshman, and he's making an immediate impact on the offense and on the special teams. He had 2 receiving touchdowns and 1 punt return for a touchdown. One of his receiving touchdowns was a 94-yard reception from Mac Jones, which is second in Bama history, longest. And he's just shown that he's a dynamic force and whenever he touches the ball. And he was also the special teams player of the week in the SEC.
Yeah, and that touchdown, it wasn't even that he just beat someone. He caught it downfield. He got, I think it was a slant. Either way, he had to go the majority of the way, and that was just him having the ball in his hands, making a play. Defensive, Bryant, you had first pick there as well.
Yeah, I'm taking Trevon Diggs. He had 4 tackles, and to go along with that, he had an interception at the end of the first half on a long Hail Mary throw. He came down with it. I think he's really proven to be one of the better corners on the team. He started last season against Florida State and got pulled early for Levi Wallace after making some mistakes, but he's really impressed me this year. I thought he's done very well.
Yeah, I think it shows the depth we had last year that we were putting him on the bench. And speaking of our depth from last year, I had Deontay Thompson. No one in this game is going to just get those stats because we had so many people get in the game, but he still managed to get 7 tackles on his own. And in terms of scheme, he plays that single high safety, and we really haven't had that since HaHa Clinton-Dix because that means you have to cover the entire width of the field with one player. And that just shows how much that Coach Saban and all the defensive coaches trust this guy. They didn't trust Minka or Ron Harrison or anyone the way that they trust this guy. He's that much of an athlete, and he proved it that he deserves it in this game. And Oakley, you had last pick.
Yeah, just like Deontay Thompson is kind of that cover guy and ball hawk, kind of like Minka was. I think that my defensive MVP, Xavier McKinney, kind of mirrors Ronnie Harrison in the way he plays. Before the season started, we really didn't know who was going to replace him at that safety position, but Xavier McKinney has been a really, really good surprise, and I've been pleased with how he's played and how he's progressed throughout the year. He's just looked more solid as the season's gone on, and he recorded a pick and half a sack.
Yeah, definitely. And there's people that we could have picked that we left off. That just shows how well everyone did. Up next, we have our Bama in the NFL. Obviously, there's so many players in the NFL that there's just so many to pick from, but here's just a few. Ridley, at one point, I don't know if it still stands, but he had the most receiving touchdowns of all NFL players, not rookies, not players in his comp, all NFL players. He had the most for the season. He had 2 touchdowns on 4 catches, so that was just an amazing game from him. Also, Amari Cooper, he got 8 catches, 128 yards, and a touchdown. Great for anyone in fantasy PPR league. Julio, even though he doesn't get the touchdowns, he got 9 catches for 173 yards, and that's just on offense. Obviously, TJ Yeldon, of course, got 2 more touchdowns, but that's just offense. If one of y'all want to take the defensive guys, there's just so many you can choose from.
Yeah, so but to add what you said about Ridley, he was also named to the Rookie of the Month this month in the NFL. But anyway, Minka got his first pick. He's doing well in the NFL. HaHa got another pick. Just Eddie Jackson got a pick. All the DBs are having great NFL careers, especially the rookies.
Yeah, and when we went into the season, everyone thought Saquon Barkley is going to be a lock for Offensive Rookie of the Year. But he's been playing good, but he hasn't been what we thought he was going to be. And with Ridley just making these stats game after game, if he keeps this up, I think he'll definitely get Offensive Rookie of the Year.
Yeah, it's not as clear-cut as a lot of people thought it was going to be heading into it.
Yeah. Up next, we have our Ballers of the Week. So pretty much we find someone who doesn't play for the Crimson and White, and we figure out who's been doing good, and we put them out there until we get more in the Heisman race. Oakley, you can go first.
Yeah, I had Chase Bryce. Like we said earlier, Clemson had really 2 quarterbacks before Kelly Bryant left, and the week that Kelly Bryant announced he was transferring, Trevor Lawrence is now the guy. He's the only really scholarship quarterback. I mean, they have quarterbacks, but those are the main guys that really they're going to go forward through the season with. So now they announced the backup as Chase Bryce. Well, during the game against Syracuse, Trevor Lawrence exits with a head injury, and Chase Bryce has to come in. Obviously, he would not be your first pick. Technically, he's your third. But he went in, and he struggled a little bit. He's a redshirt freshman. But he was the number 15 pocket passer in the 2017 recruiting class, and he engineered a couple of good drives to keep him in the game and to score, and really came out with the win. So I was impressed. I know it wasn't a perfect game. He was 9 for 29, obviously not ideal, but he came out with the win. I think that's the most important stat.
Yeah, definitely. In a game like that, when you're coming from behind with a team that has all the momentum, he had to convert a 4th down at one point. There was one point where You thought he was completely out. They were down by 2 scores, and he just kept making the play you had to make. So that was great on his point. My guy, he's a little bit more of a higher name. You've obviously heard of him, Kyler Murray. He got suspended for the first drive for being too late to practice, which honestly, that's just petty. This guy's worth $6 million from a baseball contract. He was late to a practice, and you suspend him and you keep him from being the starter, but it was for literally like less than 2 minutes. He went 17 for 21, had 432 yards and 6 touchdowns. Also got a rushing touchdown, 45 yards on the ground. And honestly, he's putting Madden numbers up on rookie mode. He's not going to be the guy that's going to be looked at in the NFL. They're not even going to scout him because he has a baseball career ahead of him. But in terms of college, if this was NCAA football 14, you would want him on your team. He just makes things happen. And after this game, I think he might be the Heisman frontrunner. If not, he's definitely top 2 with Tua. He's just good enough to get the stats, which really helps him because the defense really needs it.
Yeah, my kind of non-Alabama player of the week is Notre Dame's quarterback Ian Book. Stat-wise, he's for 278 yards and 4 touchdowns, a win over Stanford. I tell you what, he's really lit a spark into that Notre Dame team. Before that, they were struggling. They were struggling to score 30 points a game, and I believe that ever since he came in, they've scored over 30 every single game, and he's looked really good doing it. And I think he's helped establish Notre Dame as one of the top teams in the country. I think Notre Dame's a much better team with him at quarterback.
Yeah, and that actually goes right into what did we learn with Bryant. You had yours about the swap.
Yeah, like I said, I think Notre Dame's established themselves as a top 4 team in the country now after the quarterback swapped. Like I really just said before, Ian Book, he's looked great at the quarterback position. Their defense is playing good. They've played a decent schedule so far. They beat Michigan. They beat Vanderbilt. They beat Stanford. They got Virginia Tech this week, so that'll be probably their toughest game left. So if they can get by this week, they got a good shot to run the table and get to the playoff.
Yeah, so I learned that Clemson is probably most likely overrated. They're still one of the best teams in the nation, like top 10. But we saw last week that they had problems with Syracuse. Syracuse is a good team, but they're not a team that Clemson should have problems with, especially if this head injury nags Trevor Lawrence for the rest of the season. Now, they didn't announce him to be the starter against Wake Forest, but as we saw on Saturday, one play can change everything, and against a better team, that end result might be a lot different.
And speaking of one play can change everything, what I learned was Alabama fans need to be extremely thankful for what Jalen Hurts has done for us. It would have been so easy for him to leave. That's what the narrative was. Everyone thought he was going to leave, and he might still leave at the end of the year. But the fact that he's staying this entire year, and he's not just redshirting, but he's actually going to be playing games. I mean, even Tua said, you saw what happened at Clemson. One play can change anything. And if Lord forbid Tua gets injured, knowing that we have Jalen Hurts to back him up, that means so much. And I think that's a great thing because, I don't blame Kelly Bryant for leaving. I think that was the best decision for him. And you can still argue that Jalen leaving might have been the best decision for him, or at least a redshirt. But the fact that he said, you know what, I'm going to stick it with this team for this year and I'm going to be in the games, I think that speaks a lot about his character. And up next, we have our top 5 losses from rivals. So pretty much we put a top 5 out every week. This one, we just pick games that, as an Alabama fan, you always root for Alabama and then against about 3 or 4 teams. And here's some where we really got to root against some of these teams. So we just figured we put it in there. Oakley, yours first.
Yeah, so my number 5 is Auburn versus LSU. And it really wasn't like one specific game. It's just been this recent run that LSU has had. They beat them this year. They beat them last year. And really that last year's win was really huge into us getting in the college football playoff. Because if they don't win, if LSU doesn't beat Auburn, then they have a whole lot better chance of getting in the playoff. But since they exited with 2 losses, then that really helped us out a lot. My number 4 is Clemson versus Syracuse. Everybody really thought that Clemson was going to win that game, and Syracuse almost beat them again this past weekend. But Kelly Bryant got hurt in last year's game, and they had to go with backups again. It's kind of uncanny. My number 3 is Ohio State versus Clemson. I think it was last year, maybe the year before. But Ohio State really just got derailed by Clemson, 31-10 to 0. That was just an insane. I just love seeing Ohio State lose in any way possible. My number 2 is Ohio State versus Iowa. Last year, very, very, very low chance of us getting in the playoff if Iowa does not beat Ohio State, because especially by as much of a margin as they did. If it was a closer game, maybe, but by 31 points, Iowa beat Ohio State, and that was just insane. And my number 1 loss was Auburn versus Florida State. And as Alabama fans, one of the things we hate the most is Auburn bragging about what little they do have to brag about. And that would just be one more national championship they have. And, I mean, call me selfish, but I'd rather not hear that.
Yeah. Just to add on that, I mean, I didn't put that one just because I feel like that's a rival win and a rival loss, because that's what kind of started the whole Jameis Winston thing. But that's definitely a great pick across the board. There's so many to pick from, but home run for you. Bryant, you got next.
Yeah, so my top 5 kind of has a pattern too. You'll probably pick up on. Number 5, I have Georgia beating Auburn. Number 4, I have Georgia beating Auburn. And let me rephrase that. Number 5, I have Georgia beating Auburn in 2016, and number 4, I have Georgia beating Auburn in 2014. It doesn't get a lot better than Auburn getting beat. Number 3, I have A&M beating Auburn. Well, big play in that game was A&M blocking the field goal right before halftime, return for touchdown. It really helped kind of propel them. Number 2, I have Auburn blowing a lead in Baton Rouge last year. LSU just came out and dominated the second half. And my number 1 as well is Auburn losing that championship game. It doesn't get a lot better than Auburn. You know they were up on that game. I want to say it was like 21-3 at halftime or something like that, and they end up losing. So not a lot. There's not a lot better things in life than seeing Auburn fans get their hopes up and then get crushed at the end. So
yeah, I definitely agree. So my top 5, it was a little bit more diverse than Bryant's was, but not that much. Number 5, I could have picked Auburn versus Florida State for this one. I didn't, simply because that started a rivalry with Florida State, even though we never played them, and I just hate Jameis Winston, so I couldn't put it there. But I picked Auburn versus UCF. It's pretty much the same thing. I kind of put this as like an honorable mention because I'm so glad that Auburn lost to them, but also that started the whole UCF as national champions bullcrap that we have to listen to on Twitter. So it couldn't make any higher because it was there wasn't a win-win. All these others, like, you completely win, but we still lost something even when Auburn lost. Number 4, I think Bryant might have had it on his, Auburn versus Texas A&M back in 2014. I don't remember watching a whole lot of Auburn losses, but this one, it's like etched in my memory. Auburn was ranked 3rd. Texas A&M was unranked. It was close till the very end. Auburn was marching down the field. Everyone thought that they were going to win. The year before was when they had all the luck on their side. They thought they were just going to get lucky again and somehow squeak out of this with a win. And Nick Marshall fumbled a snap. It was snapped when he wasn't even ready for it. They lose the fumble in less than a minute left, and they lost the game. So that was my number 4. Number 3, Ohio State versus Iowa. Same reason Oakley had it. If they lose that game by a small margin, or if they win that game, we're not national champions. So just having that on the resume for Ohio State really destroyed their season, so it was great for us. Number 2 was LSU versus Troy. I don't really consider LSU like one of our biggest rivals, but just having them lose to someone like Troy, it deserves being on the list. And number 1, I might have been the only one to put it, but Ole Miss versus Arkansas. Again, Ole Miss isn't a huge rival, but this was back when they beat us a couple times. And if they lose this, or if they win this game, we don't make the SEC championship. We don't make it to the playoff in the first year. But it was a 4th and 17. Hunter Henry, he's out of bounds almost, and he just throws a prayer and fumbles it behind him. It's this huge lateral, and they somehow get that first down. I think they forced overtime. They end up winning the game. Just having that's one of the biggest losses that just came to mind when I thought of doing this list. So up next, Oakley, we'll let you go first. What do we need to see in this game against Arkansas coming up?
I think improvement in the run game is going to be huge in this game. Look, we're not terrible in the run game, but like we're really good most everywhere else. And I thought the run game improved a little bit during the last game, but obviously, especially with Jonah Williams out, we need to see some improvement there if we're going to play against these better defenses.
Yeah, I agree. Mine was just steps in the right direction. Of course, like we said before, we just have a few games where we can get really, really good until we're playing LSU. Our run game looks better, but it needs to get even better. Our defense also needs to flex with its depth. We had a lot of players make mistakes there in the third, fourth quarter of the Lafayette game, and we just need to clean that stuff up. So in case there's an injury, or even in the future years, we have people who are ready to fill in those roles. And Bryant, you had the last one.
Yeah, not much different than what we need to see last week. Some improvement on the offensive line, avoid injuries, build depth. I mean, if we're just being 100% honest here, Arkansas is not that good of a football team. They got beat by 30-something points by North Texas. But Alabama, they can't go in there and be satisfied by winning by 50 because they might be able to do that just because they're better athlete for athlete. They're stronger than Arkansas. They're faster than Arkansas, but they really need to focus on doing the right things. Playing your assignments, making tackles, catching the ball, throwing the ball. Just stuff like that. The little things that do matter when you play teams like LSU, Auburn, Ohio State, Clemson.
Now, don't tell Nick Saban that they're not a good team. He'll tear your head off. He'll call you out for that rat poison. Up next, we have our top four. I'd let us all go individually, but looking at it, we all did ours separately. But we had the same top four teams in the same order. 1 Alabama, 2 Ohio State, 3 Georgia, and 4 Notre Dame. So it just looks like we're all pretty much down on Clemson as of right now. Is that, you think, from the Syracuse game or just as a whole?
I think losing Kelly Bryant has a little bit to do with it. Trevor Lawrence is good, but, I'm just not sure that how a freshman quarterback's going to fare against a defense like Alabama or Ohio State. Also, I don't think it's just a Syracuse game. I think it's, the A&M game. I mean, Alabama beat A&M by close to 30 points, I think it was, and Clemson, played them right down to the wire. So Clemson's pass defense isn't that good. They're great at rushing the passer and stopping the run, but right now I think when Notre Dame, when they subbed in Ian Book at quarterback, I think they've looked like a better team, bottom line.
Yeah. And if this ends up what it's like at the end with 2 SEC teams, a Big Ten team, and Notre Dame, which is independent, the nation's just going to have a cow because that would leave 3 conferences out of the playoff, which is completely unprecedented. But if Notre Dame keeps it up, they're going to earn their own spot. Up next, we have our game predictions. We try to pick 5 games. It's really tough because there's so many games to watch this week. But Oakley, you have first Texas versus Oklahoma.
Yeah, I thought Texas, like in the beginning after they lost to Maryland, was just going to be terrible all year. But really, they've shown improvement as the years have gone on. But I can't pick against Kyler Murray and Oklahoma. I think their offense is just too dynamic for Texas. I think they're going to put up a lot of points and get the win.
Yeah, I'm going to Oklahoma too. I'm really excited to watch Texas play since they played really bad against Maryland week 1. I think Texas will keep this a close game. And I think they got a chance to win, but in the end, I think Kyler Murray will score touchdown or 2 more than Texas does.
Yeah, and I really want to take Texas. They've looked like they've improved every single week, and their defense has improved. And the Big 12 having one of the best defenses, that says a lot because that means that you just have something other teams flat out won't have. But we said at the beginning, to be the best Big 12 team, you have to have the best Big 12 offense, and Kyler Murray is definitely that. I don't think Texas is going to be able to stop him. And after this game, he might flat out take the reins of this Heisman race. Up next, Bryant, you got Kentucky A&M.
Yeah, this is a really interesting game this week in the SEC. Might be Kentucky's biggest challenge so far, going on the road to Texas A&M in a hostile environment like that. A&M's got one of the better run defenses in the SEC, as Alabama saw when they played them in Bryant-Denny Stadium here a couple weeks ago. But I think if Benny Snell can get it going and they can make a couple stops against A&M, I think Kentucky will win the game, and I got Kentucky winning.
Yeah, I have them winning as well. I think Benny Snell is the real deal, and I think they'll have just enough momentum from these past few games to go into that hostile environment, and I think they'll be able to make something happen. Now, if Texas A&M can do to Benny Snell what they did to Alabama, then they'll come out with the win. But I don't see that happening. I think he just has way too much momentum, and I have Benny Snell carrying Kentucky.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. But I also have Kentucky just because of all the momentum heading into this game on Kentucky's shoulders. Benny Snell is playing on a different level right now, and it just seems their season just seems like a dream so far, but I don't think it's going to stop. I think the momentum's going to carry them. I think it is going to be interesting to see how Kentucky's defense handles Kellen Mond, just because he has such a dynamic quarterback. But I have the Wildcats in this one.
Good pick. And I have Auburn, Mississippi State up next. And honestly, this feels kind of like a trap game for Auburn. One, it's at Mississippi State. That's a really hostile environment. Two, it's a night game. So whenever it's night and those cowbells are ringing, it's really hard to see or hard to pay attention. It's hard to play well. Just ask Jalen Hurts in our offense last year. But Mississippi State has just looked really bad lately. I think they really took for granted the quarterback guru they had last year in the past few years in Dan Mullen. And Nick Fitzgerald's taking that step back, kind of like what Jalen did the first year he didn't have Lane Kiffin. And even though the Bulldogs are projected for FPI to win this, I don't think it would be an upset for Auburn. And I think they're going to cover that 3.5-point spread.
Yeah, I got Auburn. I think Mississippi State has I think they have a chance to win this game. I really do. But this game for Auburn is more important, not just for now, but in the future. If Auburn struggles against Mississippi State, then they're going to struggle against Georgia and they're going to struggle against Alabama. This is the first time, and I believe it's been 3 or 4 years that Auburn's gone 2 weeks in a row without rushing for 100 yards. And, everybody who knows anything about college football and the SEC knows that that's a staple of Auburn is running the football between the tackles. And they really need to find a way to do that against Mississippi State if they're going to win. I think they will improve some on that, but I think Mississippi State's got a chance this week. They need to be careful, but I got Auburn.
Yeah, I have Auburn as well. I'm kind of surprised that Mississippi State has been struggling like they have recently, but I just think Auburn has more talent, and it's going to be tough for the Auburn O-line to get some yards against Mississippi State's dominant defensive line. But I do think the Tigers are going to come out with the win.
Yeah, definitely a great pick. Obviously, if Mississippi State wins that, maybe they'll make our next top 5 rival losses, but we'll just have to wait and see. Up next, Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech. Nokley, you can take this one.
Yeah, as they keep winning games, it becomes harder and harder to doubt Notre Dame. Like in that win with Michigan, we didn't know how good either of those teams were. But after that win against Stanford, I'm starting to become a Notre Dame believer, especially with Ian Book at quarterback position. They're just like a whole different team. Virginia Tech is going to provide one of their hardest games of the season. But if they get past Virginia Tech, then it's pretty smooth sailing for the most part on the way. And I have Notre Dame.
Yeah, if Notre Dame can get this win at Virginia Tech this weekend, they have a pretty schedule the rest of the way. They'll have a good shot at running the table and making the college football playoff. I think their hardest game the rest of the way after that would be like Syracuse, I think. But, Virginia Tech had a mind-boggling loss to Old Dominion a couple weeks ago. They came back last week, looked better. I think Notre Dame gets the win in the close game, but I'm really interested to see Ian Book play against Virginia Tech's defense.
Yeah, I agree that they did look better, but, Lord, I hope so. They lost to Old Dominion. How can you not look better than when you lose to Old Dominion? And I think they're just not on the same level as Notre Dame here. Good luck to them. SEC fans, they really need Notre Dame to lose, especially if you want 2 SEC teams in. And who knows, maybe they can find a way to Notre Dame it up somewhere down the line, whether it's Syracuse or I believe they play USC. So there's games where they might slip up. I don't think it's going to happen this time, though. I have Notre Dame in this one. I think it'll be by at least 2 or 3 touchdowns. And last game, of course, our game of the week, Bama versus Arkansas. Bryant, you can take this one first.
Yeah, like I said earlier, let's just be honest here. Arkansas is the worst team in the SEC probably, and Alabama's the best. So, that's kind of how that goes. Also, I've written down this is an 11 a.m. game for a reason. 99% of the time, if it's 11 a.m. game, it's not going to be a good game. I got Alabama winning this one 56-6.
Bryant coming with the hot takes out early. But this one, like I said, Saban said this could be a trap game, but him just saying that we need to keep on our toes is going to keep us on our toes. He's never going to call a trap game and then we lose. That just doesn't happen. And I think our Hawaiian Prince is going to throw for as many touchdowns as he needs, and we're going to get Jalen in as soon as possible, and Tua's still not going to see the fourth quarter. I have Bama 56-10.
Yeah, so bottom line, Bama is so good and Arkansas is so bad. like Cody said, Saban called this a trap game, but I really don't see it. I think we're just going to dominate, and like he said, Tua's probably not going to see the fourth quarter. Still, I have Bama 53-6.
Nice pick. And that wraps up this episode of Dorm Squad Sports. Make sure y'all subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you leave a rating and a comment. And hopefully you'll stay in next week. We're going to recap this week and talk about the next week. We're probably going to start our Heisman stuff relatively soon once we get a couple more games under the belt. But we hope y'all enjoy it and have a happy game day.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.